Good morning. How is everyone doing today? Everyone ready to paint some leaves? I guess it could also be good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. I just think that's so fun. That's like one of the best things about something like this live TikTok class where you can join at any time. You feel kind of weird? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I will upload this in a day or two to YouTube. We're going to get started in a few minutes, but we're going to be doing some painting of leaves with watercolor. If you have any leaves, this will help in the sketching part of it. We're going to kind of go off book on the colors a little bit, but if you have any leaves lying around, or if you can run out into your yard and just find one that's fallen underneath a tree or something like that, it might help quite a bit. If you don't have them, that's totally fine too. You're going to want a pencil, or you're going to want maybe a watercolor pencil in order to do your sketching. You're going to need some watercolors, whatever you have. I'm going to be using round brushes. I've got a size 10 and a size 12 here. I have a variety of pieces of paper cut because I'm not sure how many we're going to get through. And yeah, just bring whatever you've got. Even if you don't have watercolor, feel free to follow along and see if you can apply any of the things we're doing to the medium you're using. While we're waiting for 11 o'clock to hit, does anybody have any fun plans for the weekend they have? We're not doing anything special. Not even really sure what we'll do for the rest of the day. I do have a lot of kits to prep for some upcoming classes I'm doing, so I will probably work on some of that. I'm sure anybody else who runs their own little business knows that any free time you use to do some of that stuff. Headed to Boston tomorrow for a road trip around Cape Cod and up to Vermont. Oh, that sounds fun. Are you going specifically to see the colors, fall colors, or is it just good timing? We were up in the mountains a couple weeks ago. It was really lovely. I think we missed the fall colors up there by about a week or two, but it was so beautiful. So I went to one of our local parks in the last couple days to collect some of these leaves, and there were so many um, different types of leaves. I also want to find this one to show you guys. So I don't know for sure. If anybody knows for sure, I think this is a linden leaf, but to me this looks this looks like a dinosaur footprint or something. Bucket list trip for your husband. He wouldn't let me to go to Colorado again. Is that your go-to place to go? All right, so it's technically time to get started. Just going to tell you a very little bit about these leaves. I'm not super into tree identification or anything, but from what I know, I think this is a linden one. If anybody knows, let me know. These are cottonwood trees. We have a lot of those around here. I've got a variety of oak leaves. I even found these ones with the acorns still attached that the squirrels had like bit down the branches and they had fallen down there. And we've got some different maples around us too. Some of these maples, I don't even know if this pink color is going to really come across on the video super well, but it's got some just incredible colors to them even when they're just green. Then we have, I think that these ones might be some beech type trees. If anybody knows any better identification, feel free to share. Also, during this class, I'm going to ask you to challenge yourself a little bit on one thing. You might not struggle with this, but a few people who message me, they're having trouble with getting some of the kind of watercolor-esque look to things, and I struggle with this too. And one of the things that I have found that really helps you get there is leaving white space. So if you look at these paintings I did the other day, I did these just real quick, and 3 different kind of compositions of the same leaf, and I really do believe that this one is the least good of the 3. And the main reason is I was very careful and I made sure to cover everything, whereas these ones I was a little looser and I left some of that white space around where there might be some of those veins that run through the leaves, and it just gives it a little bit more of that watercolor-esque look to it. So I'm going to, suggest that you challenge yourself and try to leave some white space. Be a little less careful about how you're coloring everything in. These ones I did not use the neon with. So today I've got a little travel palette I'm going to work in, and I also have some Winsor & Newton ones because I wanted to show you guys a couple different palettes that I have here so you can see kind of some variety of different colors. I'll start with this little travel palette one I have here. And first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just move most of this stuff off to the side. And just grab just one of these. Alright, here's why we want to, if you have some leaves, is you can actually use them to loosely trace, and it will help you get a better idea of the shape and size of these. So the first thing I'm going to do is just place this kind of where I want it to be on here. I'm going to start with one of these cottonwood leaves, and I'm going to use a pencil. Normally I would sketch very, very lightly, but I know that it's hard to see that, so I'm going to try to sketch harder. And you'll be able to see my pencil lines at the end, but if you use a lighter touch, you won't be able to see them as much. But this is for your benefit, I'm going to sketch a little bit harder. And you don't need to do this perfectly. You know, all leaves are just a little bit different, but this is just going to give us a better idea. I'm going to make sure to get some of those kind of jagged areas. And then there's just kind of that branch. So if you don't have leaves to sketch on and you want to do this same kind of cottonwood one, you might want to start with making kind of a heart where the round parts really stick out and it kind of starts to swoop in, and then flatten the top and add a few of these little ruffles around the edges. So this is going to be our first one. Let's also look at the general vein pattern of these leaves. There is one major one that runs all the way down through the center here. And then they kind of branch out up into here in a few different ways. Now we don't have to add in all of these because we can, just let part of what the paint is going to do fill in some of these gaps and let our imaginations kind of figure this out. But I'm going to sketch in a few of these little veins that are on the inside of this. Let's just start with one leaf and then we'll move on to a second one in a minute. I've got a little spray bottle. If you don't have one, you can use a pipette or something to just wet your colors. And you can be inspired by whatever colors you want today. I'm going to kind of try to stick to the fall-ish theme with this, just so that you can kind of see the fall-ish theme, because that was the most suggested. But if you want to go with crazy colors, go with bright pinks and do what you want to do. Or you can go with more greens if you're still kind of in a summer state of mind. I've just got a round brush here. This is my slightly larger one. When I'm looking for watercolor brushes, my main thing is I like the round brushes because I think they're really versatile and I just want them to have a nice tip. And I tend to like the slightly larger ones. Now for these cottonwood ones, they in general, when they usually go from this green color that's a little brighter than this to kind of a bright yellow, and then they end up here. So let's try to incorporate some of those colors. Let's get a nice kind of lime-ish green. Let's get some yellows, and then let's just get some kind of more subtle type colors. And I'm just going to be using this little mixing well part here, and it's fine that I've got a bunch of different colors here. And I'm going to start by grabbing kind of this is like a yellow-green color. And I'm just going to kind of smush it right along here with some of those other colors. Also going to grab a little tester strip here. And I am going to just kind of test what that color is. That is a little bit too yellow, so I'm going to grab some other greens, mix that in. And that's kind of a nice color there. Kind of an olive green. So this is just a little travel palette. It doesn't actually, I'm not entirely sure what brand it is. And I'm going to have a little bit of that available here. I'm going to wash my brush off, and then next to it, I'm going to mix up a brighter kind of yellow color. And I'm just going to lean into the fact that there's a little bit of that pink there already. And let's see what that does. Ooh, I like that color. That will be pretty with that one. And then I'm going to kind of combine that yellow or the pinkish color with that green to kind of make that brownish type color that it's going to end up. So these are my three main colors here. And what I'm trying to do on this leaf is show that it has that bright green, that maybe part of it is transitioning, and maybe around the edges is where it's kind of starting to dry out and become that center brown type color. So I'm going to first just clean my brush off, load it with some water, and then I'm going to grab some of this green that I mixed up, and I'm just going to start placing this in. And again, we're going to challenge ourselves today to leave some white space. So maybe intentionally leave a few areas where you don't touch all those together, and they don't have to be super perfect. I'm going to grab a little bit more water in my brush, and then I'm going to grab just some of this yellow, and I'm going to touch that into a few places here, just to show that maybe it's starting to transition a little bit in some areas. Go back to the green, grab a bunch of water and just kind of feather this out. Try to be a little less careful with this. Just kind of go with what feels good to you. Grab a little more water. Now, if at any point you're thinking, ooh, I want a little bit more brightness, I mean, you can go straight into some of your colors, tap into those, and while everything's still wet, you can add in some more colors. You could even go for some brighter yellows. This is kind of like a nice goldenrod type gold color. And while it's still wet, I'm also going to take some of that brownish color where I mix that pink and that green together, and I'm going to touch that right along the edges here, just to give it a little more texture. good news with some of these fall leaves is this is going to feel a little bit like kind of like a coloring book. You can kind of calm down and just do your thing. I'm going to also drop this in right along the edge of this. All right, I'm going to wash my brush and I'm actually going to trace another leaf. Let's do this same one. Let's just keep going with this same shape one here. I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to trace this one too. Let's see, where do I want to put this? I'm going to put it here. Lightly tracing. And you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a third leaf too of this same one, just so that we're going on the same thing. But this one I'm going to attempt to try to sketch just in case we don't have leaves. I'm just going to kind of predetermine some of these interior shapes of some of these veins. Just hint to a few of them. And let's try this one here. So as I kind of mentioned before, you might want to start with a kind of a heart shape. And mine's going to have to go off the page a little bit, and that's okay because I'm just kind of running out of room here. But let's pretend like we had that heart shape where it's kind of that comes in and out. And then that heart shape would kind of continue over here. And then right around here is where we would just kind of give it a little texture on the sides, and then this kind of flattens. And that's how you would sketch this. I am copying off of nature's paper. That's the perfect way to think about this. And if you mess up in your sketch, it's okay. We're practicing. This is just a fun class. And for these, we're going to use a lot of the same colors, but maybe one we want to be a little darker green. So let's actually start with that. This one I'm just going to be making more of that green. I might touch in some of the brown around the edges. And then this other one, we're going to go for a really bright yellow. So let's start with the green one. I'm going to get a little bit of my, oh, thank you so much, my water in my brush. I'm going to grab more of this olive green here, mix that in. Wash my brush so I don't transfer that color. Grab a little bit more of that yellow-green color here. Mix that in, and let's just see. Oh, yes, that's nice and bright. I want to go with that. And again, I'm going to try to leave some of those white areas. See, on this one I left here and a little bit here. I'm going to try to leave a little bit of white space right along one of these veins here too. What that's going to do is going to kind of show, even if we look at these leaves, you can see they're not totally flat. I did press these, but even when they're not totally flat, they have some of these kind of areas that bump up and things, and that's going to help us kind of show a little bit of that dimension and texture on the leaf. Oh yes, thank you so much. Yes, it did. I'm going to grab a little bit of this green color, and again, I'm going to start just kind of by defining along that center. I'm going to grab a little water just to make this go a little further, and I'm going to intentionally go right along this because I remember I wanted to leave some space there. So let's try to make sure I do that now. Left a little space there in a few of those areas. Grabbing some water just help kind of fill this in and keep everything pretty wet. Grabbing a little bit more of this color here. And you don't have to follow your sketch 100%, it's okay. Just grabbing this. I'm going in between adding a little bit of water to my brush or that green. Want some white space. I don't want too much. I'm going to grab some more of this green and drop this in. I want to get some interesting textures and some of those kind of backruns or blooms, just because I think that looks really interesting on these. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab this mixture I kind of made with the green and that pink, just to kind of show right along the edges and maybe right kind of in the center. Oops, I covered up most of my white space there. Hey, I'm just trying to kind of hint to the fact that this is kind of drying out a little bit. Maybe put it in a little bit there. Now, I do plan on going back to add some more details once things are dry enough for me to put a second layer that's not going to completely blur. And you'll notice this in a lot of the things that I teach and in a lot of the things that I paint is you have to wait to let things dry to do second layers on them. And so you'll notice that I paint multiple things at once. So we're going to work on multiple leaves, and what that's going to allow us to do is to let something dry. So if you are struggling with letting things dry while you are working on other layers, work on multiple things. Maybe try to make a little grouping or even work on multiple paintings, because waiting is the hardest part. And if you can keep your hands moving on something, you're going to kind of wait a little bit better. Symmetry and center line. Yes, it is. It's very similar to the feathers. You're 100% right on that. So this one I want to be more of that goldenrod type color that sometimes these cottonwood leaves turn into. So let's go ahead and actually mix up some of that. Now I want to be a little bit more careful about the color mixing in here. So I'm going to take a damp paper towel and I'm just going to remove some of this pigment. There's not much there. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but there was quite a bit of red in there and I don't want too much of that. Yeah, these are really similar to feathers. I can totally see that. All right, I'm going to wash my brush off because I don't want too much of that green in there. And then I'm going to be grabbing a combination of this yellow. This would be kind of like a, if you've got a yellow deep, permanent yellow deep. And I'm also going to be grabbing some of this yellow ochre color. And that is the color I want there. So I've got that there. Put a little bit more water in my brush. I still have some of this in there. And again, we're going to do the same thing. Work on trying to not... One of the worst things, well, I mean, art is so subjective, and depending on how you like to paint, you can totally disregard half of what I'm saying. Feel free to. If you like something different than I do, that's totally fine. But it's really easy with watercolor to want to like overwork things and overthink and try to be really perfect about stuff. And most of the charm that comes with watercolor is in some of those imperfections. So lean into them. Be a little less careful. Be a little more haphazard. I'm going to grab some of this green. I'm going to touch this along a few areas. It's a little bit too yellow still, so I'm going to grab a little bit more of this yellow-green color to touch in. I just want a little variation of color on this because it was pretty monochromatic. And I'm just going to touch that in a couple areas to kind of show the natural variation of colors here. Yeah, the best way to be a little bit looser is in some of these practices, go into them with the expectation of, this is just practice. I'm not going to produce anything spectacular, and you might end up making something spectacular, but just play around with a few variables. Okay, so I've got 3 basic leaves here, and I want to go in and add in a few little details. I mean, you could totally leave this as it is, and it looks pretty neat even now. But if we want to emphasize some of these stem lines or the veins that run through the leaves, let's look at some of these leaves. So on the more kind of golden ones, they get darker. These ones have a very slight red tint to them when they're a little bit younger or brighter in color. This is a pretty pliable leaf, whereas this one is, you can kind of hear it, it's almost crackly. So let's mix up kind of a nice reddish brown color to add in some of those stem leaves. How do you know if you've made good art? If you like it, you've made good art. If you feel good about what you've done, it's great. That is such a tricky question because sometimes I look at something and I think, oh yeah, that looks really good. And then I come back and I look at it again and it doesn't look as good. Or there are times where I think I've made really bad art and then when I see it the next day, I'm like, oh, no, that's kind of compelling. So, yeah, that's a tough question. Would you try these with Viviva? I can grab some of the Viviva ones. Sure thing. Let's see how they look with that. Yeah, we'll do the next painting with the Viviva one so that you can see it. All right, so for the red, brownish red color, I'm going to take a little bit of this yellow ochre. I'm going to take some of this pink color. Maybe a little bit of this red. I'm just going to mix up a whole bunch of stuff. And then a little of this olive green. I don't know, I'm feeling a little blue here too. Ooh, that's way too much. Way, way, way too much. All right, I'm just going to tap a little bit of that out. And then I'm going to grab, we wanted the reddish color to really come through. A little more of that yellow. Let's test this color. Yeah, I'm excited for our little Viviva class we're going to be doing. Sunsets are so fun. Alright, so here's my nice kind of brownish color. It's a little bit darker than the other colors I have on my palette, just by a little bit. We don't want these to be, well, I don't want them to be. If you want yours to be a little bit more dramatic, go for it. Alright, we're going to be doing, if you've got a round brush, we want to be using a really nice fine tip. And one thing I have seen quite a bit is people struggling to get the really nice thin lines. And most of the time, it's not your fault. A lot of the times, if you have way too much water loaded up on the brush, so let's say I've got just a ton in here, it's going to be really hard to get that nice thin line. So if you just take a paper towel and just barely touch this so it removes a decent portion of the water, you're going to be able to all of a sudden get really thin lines if you have like a medium amount of water and color in your brush. So try that out if you have trouble with making really thin lines with your thin, or with the tip of your round brush. Okay, there's a question really quick that I do want to answer. If you're new to watercolor, should you just jump in? Are there any must-have brands that you should use? That kind of depends on who you are kind of as a person and how you like to do things. My general thing is jump in. Whatever you have, I would grab like a cheap set, like a set of Prang colors just to see if you like them. Spend like $9. The Prang ones even came with a fairly decent round brush, and so that's all you would need to buy just to test it out to see if you liked it. And then you can start to experiment and kind of see what you like about certain things. And you can even just buy little tubes, 1 or 2 colors from different brands to see if you like the brand before jumping full into that brand. All right. Yeah, get a little sketchbook. I recommend starting with, going back to the other question, find a little sketchbook that has at least 140-pound paper. Because you will have a lot more success with that. If you start with a really thin paper, you're going to struggle with a lot of things a lot more, and it will actually, the paper impacts it almost more than the paints you're using. Paper and brush. You're going to invest the most in paper because you really only need one brush. You just need a good round brush to get started. Okay. Anyways, I'm back to these veins. All right, let's just kind of look at these, have these somewhere in sight so we can see them. And again, I don't want to be too heavy-handed for this, so I'm going to set this down here. And then one other little tip I have if you need to be really steady with things is I'm actually going to take my left hand, I'm right-handed, and I'm going to kind of brace my forearm a little bit off screen, which is going to give me a little more stability in what I'm doing here. And I'm going to make sure that this is nice and kind of stable and is not going to move too much because I want to do some really fine tip dragging here. And they don't have to completely, I've got a little bit too much in my brush still. You don't have to completely touch. If you think that's a little bit too dark, you can always grab a little bit more water and blot it out to do some of these other ones here. And just kind of hint. Oh, we don't want to fill in all of the gaps here. Your brain loves to kind of extrapolate on what's happening. And so the more kind of mystery you can kind of create for your brain, the happier your brain is going to be with the result. Okay, so I'm just going to do that same thing on some of these other ones here. I'm just kind of using my tester strip to also just tap off a little bit of excess that I have. And let's just, I'm basically just adding this on one side because I kind of want to just create the little divot. You could actually come on both sides on part of it if you want to kind of create a little highlight for that. And I'm just going to kind of go along some of these sketch lines that I had and some of the areas where I left some of that white space just on one side of them. There we go. Let's do one more over here. You could even come along and re-emphasize some of these edges if you wanted to kind of give just a little bit more feeling to the edges. If you feel like yours are a little undefined, you can go ahead and do that too. Play around with a few different things. Okay, so there are these. We can always add a background to this in a little bit if we want to, but I'm going to grab another one of my pre-cut pieces of paper here and we're going to draw on some different leaves. And again, it's better if you have some leaves to try to sketch. You know, the main one, these ones are going to be pretty easy to sketch on your own. These ones are going to be harder to get some good symmetry. So for the maple ones, you might want to try to find some maple leaves in order to do it. It will help you a lot because there are so many different parts of it that you need to mirror. Okay, so I said I was going to do Viviva for this one, so let me go grab those. I think I actually have a brand new set here. Yes, because I took my other one, one I've been using, to the mountains and I haven't unpacked all that. So these are the Viviva color sheets, and a few of you have these that are on. I know that for sure because you bought them from me. I am getting some more, so I'll be able to restock those. These are pretty unique watercolors. They work in a little different way to other things, and so you're going to see that a little bit. I am going to actually stick this little mixing panel onto here because this will help us mix up some colors. This is just some like wax paper. You can also use these with like a mixing palette or something like that. I do that as well. All right, we're going to start by sketching on a few of these different leaves. Let's actually see if I've got any of the maples pressed in here. I pressed some of these in this Uline catalog. Ooh, this one's kind of neat. Here's a fun maple too. That's another cottonwood. Cottonwood, we've got a lot of cottonwood trees here. Okay. I kind of like this one here too. Let's do this one. We're going to work on a few different leaves on this one. Yes, of course. Thank you for joining. I'm going to put that there too, and then let's find a little leaf to fill in. I'm going to do all my sketches at once on this one. I'm going to find this little oak leaf. It's not, this is so funny how good this works to kind of trace these leaves. And I don't know if you can tell, but I mean, I'm following the lines, but I'm not being overly careful to get this 100% perfect, because it's going to end up looking like the leaf because it's, you know, the general shape. Let's just take note. So on these ones, most of the veins run straight up into kind of the tips where these branch out. So it would kind of come up like this, and this, and this, and this. Let's also put a couple down here. Okay, set that one to the side. And for those of you who don't have the Viva ones, you can absolutely still just use the normal watercolor paints. For this next tutorial, I'm just going to be showing you kind of a variety of things. I switch in my lives, my palettes or the paints I'm using, usually at least once or twice, just so that you can see that it can be done kind of with anything, because I know we're all working with different supplies. Kind of a goofy looking maple, but that's all right. And this is kind of the same thing here where the veins shoot straight up into kind of the tips of these points, even down here into those points here. And then they do branch off in a few areas. Okay. And this last one is going to actually be 3 leaves, and they are touching, so I'm going to have to trace the outline of these and then fill in some of the details. So, and then up here, these are real kind of ragged, come to a real nice point. What are the common trees by you? I'm curious to know. All right, so when I take this away, this one here, just looking at this, it actually ends about here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one on this side. I'm going to come down and meet that point. But this one overlaps this part, so, and it ends right here. And then this one is going to go here. And then these all come down into this. And they all mainly have one predominant, I mean, you can see on the back side, so that veinage a little bit more. And then, but they mainly just have this one here. So let's just start with that one. We might add in some more there. We've got 3 different leaves here. You mainly have cactus by you. I'm assuming you live somewhere in the desert. All right, so if you've got normal watercolors, keep doing your normal watercolor things. I am going to be explaining a little bit of variation on things for using these. So we've got all our different colors here. And let's actually take a look at, I'm just going to wash my brush off, and I want some greens, and I also want to do some kind of bright oranges and some of the bright yellows. We're going to go a little bit brighter and more vibrant here. Feel free to try to kind of match that if you want to. Let's just check out this dusk orange. That would be pretty. We can actually mix up our colors right on this. I'm going to wash my brush off before I touch another one. And let's grab some of this yellow ochre here. I'm just scribbing on here. Oh yeah, that's going to be a pretty color on this leaf here. So that's what we're going to actually, I'm going to start with this little oak leaf, and I'm going to make this kind of a brown and an orange color. Let's get some more of that orange. Let's just put this here so that it's readily accessible so I can see it. And I'm also going to grab some of this vermilion. I want to lean into some of these bright colors. Okay, so I've got kind of a mixed up brown. I've got a yellowish color, and then I've got vermilion, which is kind of like a red-orange color. And we can do a couple things here. We can come straight in with a damp brush and grab some of this kind of yellowish brown color I mixed up and just pop this in. We could also come in here with some water and then grab some of these and drop them in and just see how it kind of flows. Oh gosh, that yellow color is so vibrant. Let's drop in a little bit of this vermilion color. Let's try to drop it in a few different areas. I'm trying to really get a lot of variation on this. This is not going to be a super, oh, got a moogie here. Oh well. This is not a super true to form color one. I want to just kind of lean into some of those typical fall colors. I'm following that along, trying to leave a little bit of that white space there. Let's add a little bit more of that brown kind of around some of these edges over here. Ooh, there we go. I like the colors there. Okay. I'm going to take away that kind of vermilion color because I don't want that on my greenish ones because I want to lean more into kind of greens for these, the greens and the yellows. So let's move this. If anybody is brand new to my lives and hasn't heard me explain this before, but I recommend working on something that you can easily move around so that you can paint from a comfortable position. So when I cut these down and I put these on these little hard boards, this is just MDF board, it's nothing special, means I can rotate it so that I'm always working at a comfortable angle and I'm not trying to get into nooks and crannies in a way that's uncomfortable. Okay. Let's get in here. I think there's like this really pretty, there's this green color that I want. Yeah, that sap green color. I want the sap green one. I wash my brush a little bit. Let's grab a little bit of that and just see that color there. I'm going to grab a little bit more. And then I want to put some of that yellow ochre in it because I want this to be a little bit lighter. You could also do some burnt sienna in there, but I love yellow ochre, so I'm just going to grab some of that yellow ochre. Oh yeah, that's going to give us like this really nice kind of army green color. You can see it over there. And so I've got my army green color here. Let's also just make sure we have the yellow ochre kind of readily available, because I'm going to drop that in a few areas here. So this one, again, I'm going to try to leave some white space. I'm going to predefine, dip into some water. Try to leave a little white space here. Grab a little bit more of this color. I'm going to go straight into some of that yellow ochre for a little bit. Put that in a couple areas. Grab some more water in my brush. Thin some of that out just to get it to move around the page a little bit. Grab some more of that kind of army green color. And that's a little bit too much white space there. Where I felt like it was. And just fill this in. So I'm using a slightly smaller brush on this one. There was no real rhyme or reason, it was just the one I grabbed. Let's grab a little bit more of that yellow ochre and touch that in a couple different areas. Adding in some variation of the color. You don't need to get super crazy, you don't have to add every single color, but if you just kind of vary it a little bit, even though this is not what this leaf looks like, there's something that feels kind of very natural about certain parts of it maybe starting to change and just kind of give the hint of some of that fall thing happening. Okay. There's that one. And this one. Now, we've got overlapping things here. You've got two options when you have overlapping items. One is that we can actually treat these as 3 completely different leaves where we want one to dry at a time in order to make sure that we're not kind of bleeding into the other leaves, or you can just paint the whole thing all together. I'm going to maybe do a combination of those 2 things just so you can see the difference. Let's treat these 2 leaves as one, basically, and we'll try to kind of create some definition between these 2. And then I will do this one at a completely separate time so that you can see what would happen if you waited for one to dry and then did the other one with the overlap. For this one, I'm feeling a little bit more, let's go a little bit more blue-green, and then maybe, I'm going completely off book because this is not the color of this. Let's maybe add in some pink highlights because I really like the pinks that are in this set too. First, I need to get some water. All right. So I can actually kind of modify this green color I have here. Let's go. So we did the sap green. We've got sap green started with us. Let's grab just a little bit of this viridian hue here. This has got a lot of blue in it. So just a little bit of that is going to give us quite a difference in our green color. I'm going to grab a little bit more, and then I'm also going to grab a little bit. Let's see what happens if we add some of this light green, because this light green can be a really pretty color too. I'm going to just combine all my greens to see what color I get. I like that color. All right, so I'm going to be painting this leaf here and this leaf here, and I'm treating them kind of as one. We're going to let it dry, and then I will treat this one as a totally separate one so that we can see the difference. So, starting with this really kind of vibrant green color, add a little more water to my brush. I'm going to grab a little more of that sap green and kind of put that in throughout, just to create some of that variation. Trying to avoid that there. And again, I want some of that white space down the center. I find that if you intentionally change the colors as you go throughout, and the more kind of intentional you are about some of those things, the more natural it can look rather than trying to create just a really flat wash on some of these things. And if you're painting nature stuff, nature is not perfect. All right, so one of the things I'm going to do here, I'm painting these 2 kind of as one at the same time, and they're going to tend to bleed together here a little bit. What I do want to try to do is either not let these touch completely in certain areas, or I want to make this one that's underneath seem a little bit darker. In some of those areas. And you can see I'm kind of just creating that side, the saw side. It kind of looks like a saw teeth to me by just using the tip of that brush. And I can kind of fake some of that shadow here by actually just grabbing some blue in this. Let's just grab a little bit of this peacock blue. And let's kind of create some shadow here. Kind of gives it the impression that this is a little bit lighter and that's a little bit darker. Okay. Maybe I'm going to put a little bit more of that in here. I just like that color a lot. Okay. All right, so I still have this one here to do. I want to let this one dry a little bit more so that I don't have any possibility of these 2 bleeding together. You're seeing I'm getting a little bleeding of that one into this one. It's totally fine, but just in case that's something you are trying to do, I'm going to show you the 2 different ways to do this. All right, so we can go back on these other ones and add in some of those kind of center stem or vein type details. And I already still have some of these colors. I can do a couple things here. Let's just see what we have on our palette. So we've got a yellow here, and I've got a little bit of this green. I can mix in a little bit of this blue and that yellow to make kind of a slight green. If I want to, I can grab... You don't need much on these little Viviva ones. You don't need much in order to make a huge change because they are so pigmented. You can kind of just like almost just tap onto these. To make a big change in that color. There we go. Alright, so let's add in some of these center stem details. Try not to completely cover up your white space you've got there. Don't completely complete these. Let just a simple kind of flick happen, and some of them are going to be a little thicker, some are going to be a little thinner. And then these ones, it's mainly just the ones here, but there might be a few you might want to just kind of embellish a little bit here. There's definitely a mogi hair there. Just to give a little emphasis. You can also, again, kind of come along some of the edges if you wanted to give them a little bit rougher feel to some of those edges. And this one is a little bit tricky because as we can see on this one, the veins are actually technically lighter, but there's like this little hint of some pink in some of those veins. So let's actually just go for it. Let's go for it with the kind of pink type color. So here we go. I think I'm going to be going for this deep pink. I'm going to grab my, I'm going to wash my brush off. Let me just show you this color here because I love this color so much. It's so pretty. There's actually another really pretty pink in here too. This magenta. I'm thinking that magenta plus this deep pink would be really good. Oh yeah, look at that color. I need to maybe bump this over. You just started painting this week? Oh, that's so exciting. All right, so I'm going to grab a little bit of the magenta, squiggle that here. Use a little bit of this deep pink type color. Where are you? Here it is. And I'm going to squiggle that into there so we've got kind of this in-between type color here. I'm going to also put a little bit more water on my brush because I don't want this to be super duper saturated because these do tend to have lighter. And we're just going to hint. Again, remember, if you need to unload your brush a little bit, you can kind of just tap it and drag it either on some scrap paper or on a paper towel. And then I'm just going to hint to this in a few areas. I don't want too much. I personally don't want too much. If you want more, that's totally fine. I'm going to grab maybe a little bit more of that color. Have a little variation. There we go. All right, so to recap on this one, I had talked about if you have overlapping things, you've got a couple different options, and you can either kind of paint them all at the same time and try to create some separation with changing some colors, but they're going to bleed together a little bit. Now we've worked on some other stuff, and this is primarily dry. This is going to be, no, that's pretty dry right there, so that's good. And now I can show you the difference of if you actually kind of work in little segments and if you only worked at one of these at a time and let them dry so that you can create more separation. Again, you don't have to do this. So for these ones, I used a mixture of a whole bunch of different greens, but then I was also just touching straight into that sap green color. Put a little water in my brush, grab a little bit of this color here. Again, I want to try to make sure I create a little white space on certain areas. I'm going to touch into that sap green a little bit. And for this one, what I want to do is I just want to make sure I'm not using the exact same colors necessarily next to each other. If I want to make sure that there's a lot of variation between the two different shades so that you can very easily just see right away those are different layers. So I'm going to actually kind of lean more into my darker green type colors here. I'm going to put those in a couple areas. There. You guys are too nice. If you're brand new to watercolor and you're watching and you're thinking, oh, I don't know, this is a great one to start with because there's really very little rules that you need to do this one. Just kind of fill it in. Treat it kind of like a coloring book, you know? Alright, so this is what we have so far. I do want to add some of those stem details here, and I think I'm going to be doing that with kind of that yellow ochre brown, or actually we can dip into some, let's check out this burnt umber. That might be a nice color. Yeah, I mixed that with a little bit of that yellow ochre there. I'm going to tap that off so I don't have way too much in my brush. And even though this is a pretty light color, even just adding and layering on colors, we're going to be able to see some of those layered on top. You know, we're just creating some minor details here. These are like the supporting characters, you know? They don't need to do a ton. They do need to kind of be there in order to fill in some of those gaps. But they don't have to be. And this one's still too wet for me to add that onto that one. Of course, I'm so glad I can help. All right, at this point, I'm going to let you guys choose. We've got two options, and we can make subsets of options. First option is, do you guys want me to add backgrounds to these two paintings, or do you want me to do another sheet where I show you some different leaves? Go ahead and let me know in the comments. And then also let me know in the comments if you want, what kind of paint do you want me to use? Is there a certain one that you've seen me test that you'd like me to use in the next one? Do you want me to switch over to tube paints? Do you want me to do really crazy colors? Different? Okay, we've got more leaves and then a background. Okay, so we're getting both. Oh, thank you so much for joining. Hi. Yes, I will be adding this to YouTube in a day or two. I've got a request for some of the neons. Okay, we're going to mix Shinhan and neon together. Now, I've got bad news for my Shinhan lovers. They've taken the professional one, which is the cheaper of the two options, out. Alright, we're going to do some more leaves. We're also going to do some more backgrounds because we've got enough time. We can do a couple more leaves. These are my dried Shinhans, except for this magenta color is coarse, so I'll stay away from that color. But the rest of these are Shinhan. I have not used those before. But we're going to use these, and then we're going to pop in a couple neon colors into these next leaves that we're going to do. Then we will add a background to at least one of these. Backgrounds can be the hardest part. Okay, I've got to do this dinosaur foot looking thing. I don't know if you're still on here, Andrea, but Andrea's been painting a lot of dinosaurs lately, and this leaf reminds me of a dinosaur footprint. Yeah, anybody that is on now, if you like animals, or you've got kids, Andrea's been doing some really cool kid art tutorials recently. So one of the tricks to painting leaves, if you are just joining now, is find some leaves, trace them. Boom, leaf. And then we just kind of want to look at the leaf in order to be able to kind of study how these go. The other thing you can actually look at while I am thinking about this is pay attention to simple things in leaves. See how these ones, there's always this like very, very slight offset from where the next vein is. They don't usually line up, whereas like all of these all start from this point. Or on the oak one, some of them they do start from the same point. So sometimes, or even just the way that they're arranged on the stems, you'll notice that sometimes they alternate sides, and sometimes they come out from the exact same area. Oh, thank you. All right, so we split this one in half, and then we've got a variety. There's this one is a very veiny and pretty prominent veiny one. So this one we want to do some of the we're gonna want some nice greens and then some of these reds for these veins. We don't need to put all the veins in because, you know, our imaginations can add in a lot of the details, but I'm going to put a few in. I've switched over to the shin hand one, so I need to actually spritz these. It's been a couple days since I've used these. Get them wet. And I already have some greens over here, so that's going to work out. I'm going to switch back over to my size 12 brush. And I'm just going to grab a couple of these greens, and I'm just going to mix them into these greens that are over here. So this is the sap green and the olive green. And let's see what that color is. Just check it out. Ooh, that's nice. That works pretty good. I'm also going to want, I'm going to wipe some of this out because I want to add in a little bit of yellows in order to kind of create some variation, yellowish brown. So I'm going to start by just adding a little water here with a little bit of that green. Grabbing some of this yellow ochre. Love this yellow ochre. A little of this yellow. Ooh, it was a lot of that yellow. Let's counteract that with a little bit more of that green, and let's just check that. Okay, we've got a little variation in color. We've got two different ones. Again, in this session today, I am challenging everyone to try to keep some white space. So don't fill in all of the gaps. So we're going to start by just putting some of this down. I'm going to put a little more water in my brush because I want a little variation in how this kind of color is. And I'm not going to go back and completely fill in all those areas where it didn't get full coverage. Just kind of going back and forth with these two different colors, adding some more water to my brush, filling in some of these gaps, leaving some of those white spaces. This is a bigger leaf, so this is taking me a minute. These are with the shin hand ones. All right, let's throw in a real curveball here towards the bottom. Washing my brush. And I'm going to take some of this fluorescent because there was a request for that. And let's just pop some of that in here. I don't know what this is going to look like, but we're going to add some in. Ooh, that actually kind of looks kind of neat. Grab a little bit of that green. I'm still so surprised by these because if you look at these, some of these have kind of cracked. They feel like they would be chalky. I mean, they don't rub off at all, but they really pack a punch. Almost never remember live classes. Oh, yeah. You know, I do try to set a calendar reminder in my profile a few days before, because I know I would forget. I know I would. I'm going to plop this in a few areas. I don't know. That looks kind of neat. All right, there's some fluorescent for you. So these are the Uli Chroma blends. I can't tip this over now that I've wet everything. Actually, maybe I can if I close this. Uli Chroma blends. I was super skeptical of these, but somebody suggested them. When they came, I was like, I don't know. And then they're magic. They're magic. All right. We've got one here. It's kind of doing its thing. I've left some white space. We've got some variation of color. Let's throw down another leaf in here just to do one more on this. I don't know if any of these are great compositions of leaves, but they are all leaves, so that's what we're doing today. How about this one? How about that one here? And we're just going to kind of trace this one, and I'm just going to loosely squiggle. Again, remember I can use just the tip of my brush in order to really create that squiggle. Got the general shape. And then this one has a lot of those center kind of veins, and they all kind of run perpendicular to each other. Like this one almost looks like machine made. I don't know how well you can see the details on those. Compared to the other ones, it has a lot more regular pattern to it. Okay, I'm still using my shin hand ones. Let's come in here. And let's lean into some of the pretty browns. I need to get better at using more browns. I just don't. We're going to add in some of this. I think this is the burnt sienna. Let's grab a little bit of this vermilion color. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, that looks beautiful there. But I want another one too, because I always want to have at least two different colors. Well, I do when I am painting these things. I'm going to grab some of this. I think that one is burnt umber, and I'm going to mix it into that green. Actually, that works really well. That was burnt umber into that yellow green. And let's do these two colors together. Starting with kind of the, I've created kind of a rusty type orange, brick red almost. Vary that color by changing what I'm loading into my brush, adding a little more water into my brush in some areas so that it'll be a little bit lighter in some areas. Coming back in with some of that bright color. I just like to, on the fall leaves, really just kind of go for creating texture by just letting a little bit loose here. And we want to make sure we've got a little white space in some areas. It doesn't need to be a whole bunch. We can drop in some more of that brick color while things are still wet. You could come in and kind of tap along one of those edges where you made the white space. Add in a few details if you want to. Just going to leave that kind of like that. Cool. Let's see what happens. I would probably leave this like this, but out of curiosity's sake, let's grab some of this kind of magenta pink and see what happens if I drop this into a couple of these areas here. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Ooh. Oh yeah, that's pretty. I'm surprised how well this neon actually kind of plays nicely with the other watercolors. If anybody is joining of recent times, we've gone a little off book here. We switched over to doing some other leaves, and we're using a combination of, or I'm using a combination of these two palettes that were requested. This one is mainly my shin hand. And then these are these Uli Chroma blends that are so bright. Yeah, I didn't expect that to look that good either, but I am glad I added that. I actually wish that I had used that neon pink for when I was painting these maple leaves that have like that neon color on them. Okay. All right, I need to let this one settle. I can add in a few details on this one. So this is my little dino leaf dude one. And I think I'm going to be using, I can actually, since this is all on one page, let's add some of the details using to this one, using the same colors I used in that leaf over here. I will have more of the product stock soon, so stay tuned. I put in an order for the Viva ones, and they will be, I think they're going to be here soonish. I think did they ship them the other day? I'm trying to remember. Anyways, I'm using the same color of the base here to add in a little detail. Let's just double check how much I have in here. That's a pretty good amount. And remember, this does not need to be perfect. We're just kind of adding in a few little details. Let's get a little bit of this fluorescent pink in there. Sure, why not, you know? Just go for it. And then I can actually just kind of probably emphasize some of this here. Still a little bit wet, but I do want to add in some of these. We're going to need to wait for a second. I got to be patient. All right, this is the test. I will add in some of those veins or stems in a little bit, but in the meantime, let's add a background to one of these paintings. Let's do it with this one. I feel like this one would look nice with a background. Anybody have any suggestions for background color? I'm trying to think. Pink could be kind of cool. Lean more into kind of the pinks and reds that are kind of the harvest colors. A wine color. Ooh, wine would be a nice, pretty color. Okay. Let's start here. I've got my... Actually, let's switch over. Do you guys want me to use the Shinhan palette for the background, or do you want me to use Winsor & Newton, in case anybody's using that? I'm going to go for this one. I'm going to re-wet these. And I am going to kind of, since I want to mix up some wine colors here, so I'm going to grab this. Okay. And let's get, all right. So I don't know if this dried palette set I actually put any of this Bordeaux color in that Shinhan has, but they do have a beautiful Bordeaux color. So I'm going to grab this from the tube set. This has been sitting for a little bit, so it might be kind of dry. Also, there's very little left in this, but I can use kind of a wet brush in order just to grab a little bit of this color out. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's pretty. I might even add a little bit of purple into that. You saw someone use binder clips? Oh, to help squeeze it out. Yeah, part of the problem is this is actually a little bit dried in here. I didn't put the cap on very well. So, whoops. That was my fault. I hate to tell you guys this, but I am the person who always leaves caps partially unscrewed on things. Thankfully, my husband is very sweet and doesn't seem to mind too much. All right. Got a nice pretty color here. I'm going to leave that one as it is, and then I'm going to mix up a second kind of red purple type color, and then maybe even a third one with a little bit of orange undertones. I'm going to go for 3 colors here just to make sure I've got enough colors to actually go over everything. All right. Also going to switch over to my slightly larger brush, get a little further with that. Okay, this is just the red color with a little water, and then here is the violet color. Mix that in. It's kind of close to the other one, so let's lean a little bit more into that violet just to create a little more definition between these 2 different colors so you can really tell the difference. Oh yeah, that's pretty. Your phone's at 1%. And then, again, let's grab some of the red, and then this is Crimson Lake from that Chin Hand set. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of this orange. Oh yeah, these 3 I think are going to be really pretty together. Okay. So, the way I'm going to be adding this background in here is, good morning. I'm just going to be kind of going in between these different colors. I already have this kind of orangey reddish color loaded in my brush, so let's just start there. I'm just going to put this down. I'm going to add a little more water to my brush to stretch that just a little bit more. Then I'm going to just pick up some of that real kind of purpley color. And while everything's still wet, we're going to move kind of between. And then I want to, in order to create this background, I want to go up close to these, but I'm going to mainly make sure I leave white space. If you go over yours, it's okay. Let's add a little water just to stretch this color a little bit. And let's add some of that Bordeaux. Ooh, yeah, that's a pretty color. What brand brushes am I using? Well, right now I'm using something that I haven't actually talked about yet, so I'm going to wait to talk about that. But they are round brushes, and I use a variety of different brands of round brushes too. A little more water, just adding in, you know, you want to kind of get kind of close to some of these, but you don't have to be perfect with them. And I think this would look a little better with a little bit darker. This might need a second layer on this. A little more contrast. But we'll get at least 1 layer put down here. And in general, I think this looks pretty neat. Now, I'm going to finish this off, and I'm going to give you 1 more little tip or possible option that you can do to yours. In one of my recent videos, I talked about when to add pen, and somebody asked, I mainly add pen afterwards, and there are a lot of watercolor artists that add it before they actually paint. But somebody had asked what happens if you do, and so I kind of made a video just showing that there are different types of pens, and some are going to bleed and some aren't. Now, I use a pen that bleeds, and so I have to add it afterwards, but that's not just because that pen is not waterproof. It's also because I like to think of adding pen on mine as kind of a painting saving type thing. So if I'm not super duper excited about what I just painted, The Shinhan palette, I bought Shinhan paints from Amazon, and they're not selling the ones that I like anymore, unfortunately. They only have the uber expensive ones, which is unfortunate. And then but I bought this. This is a different palette that I put all these into, like squeeze and let dry. Seeing House of Garden flag here. Anyways, so when I think about adding pen, it's usually because like I don't particularly love what I've just painted, or I just want there to be more definition, or maybe I just want to play a little bit more. So let's say that hypothetically you're not absolutely in love with your paintings. Like this one is okay. I wish this one would be better. But maybe it would actually be a little better if I added some pen details. So this might be something you want to play with on ones that you don't like so much. Wait till they're dry, and then you can grab any old pen. You don't have to kind of pre-plan with fancy pens. And then let's just try to outline this. Let's just see if it improves at all when I outline. It might not. It's going to give it a completely different look. Just play around with what you like and see. Sometimes things aren't completely, a lost cause. You might think they are, but if you add in a little more detail or something, yeah, I tape it to keep it flat as well as to keep it in place. You will stretch your imagination until you're not completely in love with your paintings. Oh goodness, yeah, sometimes it's hard to paint. All right, I do want to add in a little bit of these details on this. This will be the last thing I'm going to do today. So while I'm doing this, to add in some of these details, because this one, it's like very structure based. If you've got any final questions for the day, please let me know, and I can answer those. So this one, I'm going to just make sure that I really keep these all kind of parallel, because they do seem pretty much just parallel. Ooh, I hear my husband sneeze upstairs. That's Nick. Go. Oh yeah, that definitely added something. I'm going to add a little more detail to the center, and I think I might even emphasize some of these sides here. There you go. All right, we worked on quite a few different things. Just as a quick recap, this was the first one, and this is with a little travel palette I have, and for the leaves, and then the background was Shinhan. Then we switched over to using the Viva watercolors for these ones. I do love how some of these bleed, and they're just really pretty. And then we went just a little bit off book and used a mixture of Shinhan and some fluorescent just to see what things are. And that was pretty much it. So I thank you guys for spending the time. It's fun for me to be back. I will be doing Saturday classes for a while now, because I don't think I have anything coming up on any Saturdays. But thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you guys next time as well.